sort of just that, a conversation. We've talked through a couple of intersectionalities in their work, some similarities, some differences. And so I'm very curious just to hear from both of the artists, as are you, I'm sure, and just have a conversation about their work. And if we can, we might walk around a little bit and show some examples of things. Tess is all set to do that. So without further ado, let's get started.
Well, thank you, Lynette. I guess I'll start. I'm really, so happy to be here in person. Like, what a treat that has been to be able to actually have a physical show with all the precautions and still have that digital outreach, where almost the digital outreach is still maybe more effective, but to actually have like physical, be able to be in the presence of physical work has been really lovely after a year of creating just virtual work. One intersection, Justin, between our two shows, because I think thematically they're pretty divergent, but in their divergence, they kind of span the spectrum as far as a relationship to tools and technology in art making, and that we have kind of represented here like the full spectrum of media and technology as it relates to art making. Mine may be on the extremes of painting and emerging tech with, I have some augmented reality pieces and some web-based stuff, some 3D animation, simulation, and paintings. And then in the center of that, which is also in the center of the space here, is your work, which is photo-based sculpture and bronze casting as well. So that's just one of my kind of initial observations, kind of being here over the week, and that it ties together thematically in that way, and that it does kind of represent the spectrum of media as it relates to technology and art making.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was thinking last night when you were kind of touring everybody around was I noticed that, and you had written about it somewhere, but you were kind of talking about like how there was this, I don't know, impulse to kind of return to something more, I don't know, maybe expressive with the watercolor and that sort of thing. And that's really something that I've always been a part of. I mean, my training is in photography, but like all through undergrad, and I worked with people who have these like really intense material kind of presences in their own work, and so they were the people who trained me and like kind of helped me realize those things. So I think for me, one of the early frustrations with photography was that it was so flat and it was so immaterial. And so that like in terms of a technical approach to art making, that was something that I've like always struggled with, even through graduate school. And now I still like have a hard time with the flatness of the image. And that's what's kind of led me to paint and to deal with other materials. Is that something you maybe see with those new watercolors of yours?
The dimensionality of them, is that something?
Yeah, I mean, well, I know that the watercolors also have those IR, the
QR?
QR codes, I'm sorry, yeah. And so there is this like really technical component where things do flatten out and become really illusory, but the paintings themselves are like paper on the wall, you know. And so I think that to me, that maybe dichotomy between those two things is that, I guess what I'm asking is that something that you're interested in? Was that like a conscious decision that you made, or was that just something you were feeling like kind of exhaustion with all the technology, and you just wanted to like make something with your hands, you know?
So I think you're coming from this from kind of a sculpture mindset, which is not necessarily what I was thinking about. But now that you say that, yes, I think that's something that is like a nice layer, in that we do have these like layering of these screens or these painting's a screen also, right? It's an illusory screen.
Yeah.
So we have these like layerings of these screens, and in that you have some dimensionality. I think for me, I was at a moment where this past year I'd been making a lot of emerging tech work and a lot of augmented reality pieces as a way to respond to not being able to have a physical show. I can show you some. This is a this is one of them. It's a flower app. It grows native wildflower species from Oklahoma, and you can download the app. It's free, and then you can grow them like in your own space. And I think this kind of work at the beginning of the pandemic was successful in that it allowed people to kind of escape into a faux natural environment when we were all really stuck inside. And so I use a Wacom tablet to draw these flowers and to make these flower sprites, but dealing with the practicalities.
Oh, you muted.
That's my bad. Oh, that's okay. Making this kind of all of the practical aspects of actually producing an augmented reality application, it's like very, very stressful, very, very draining work, and not pleasurable by any stretch. And when we were preparing for the show, the election's kind of at this fever pitch. And it's really about truth and honesty in so many ways. It's like that's such an important aspect of our cultural moment, is our relationship to truth, to personal truth, to honesty, to integrity, to all of these kind of value-based or ethics or moral-based questions. Like, we're really being called to respond in a way that it felt like making spectacles of tech isn't valuable. It's not really providing, I think it provides an escapist kind of sensation for viewers, but it doesn't do anything. It wasn't doing anything for me to make that kind of work for the show. And I really it was serendipitous. For me to even be out here physically. We've been traveling for the last 2 months and visiting family, and I kind of just let my intuition kind of guide me. And I had been given back from my mother, who I gave her a set of watercolors. She's like, here's this pad of paper and these watercolors back. And I thought, let me just start making some paintings. Like, that feels like an appropriate activity at a time where I don't want to be engaging in, I don't feel like it's the right move to be engaging in like illusions and in the world of appearances that emerging tech or tech in general lends itself towards. So those are some of the themes I was kind of thinking about.
Yeah, that's really, really lovely. This notion that there's an honesty in the directness of painting, and then it sort of departs from the. I've never heard it called technology called a spectacle, but that's such a word that I've been trying to kind of put on the work that I've been doing for a long time. I think the hard part always is for me, there's the technical part, or the formal part that's always fun, and then there's the conceptual part that's the part that always feels like the real legwork, and it's always the that's the wading through the forest and sort of not quite knowing where you're going. And I think that for me, that was really interesting in terms of this show, because I was looking at the work that you were doing. I have another show open that was scheduled. Both of these shows were scheduled a long way out. So I have another show that's about to close in Cincinnati right now, and it was really, both of these shows that I was working on at the same time a year ago were really pretty intensely sculptural and physical. They were big things. I was looking at a lot of Constantine Brancusi's work, and I was kind of making these weird amalgamations of those things. So kind of what happened when all of this slid in the virus, and I have a pre-existing condition that makes it hard for me to travel, which is why I'm not there. I mean, I had every intention of being in Columbus for this and for the opening and that sort of thing. I really did have to switch gears and kind of like revisit some ideas that like maybe I hadn't really felt like I'd fully articulated yet, which was like, again, the illusion or the artifice of the image. And I think that was such a really nice way to put it, is like the honesty of the image maybe is, and I think with so much conversation surrounding like, terms like fake news and buzzwords like that. And I think also, yeah, those things were really impacting my work too. And so to think about the image as a material reality, something that wouldn't necessarily be that couldn't be argued with. That was a big part of what I was doing, and so that's why I think all of these things stuck to the wall. I try to make them feel material in some kind of way. So yeah, I think that those are really fantastic observations, Tess. So the oyster shucking knife work, that for me, that was a big moment and a big discovery.
Can you all see it is it prioritized, my phone here? I'm walking around and showing your work as you're talking about it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that so much.
If everyone wants to maybe, I think Lynette would have to prioritize my phone as the primary speaker, or just get a grid mode, and I'll walk around, okay?
Cool. Yeah, so this one with the oyster shucking knives, I was thinking about, that one's called oyster.png, which is like this notion that there's like a shell, and then you sort of incise the edible part from the protective coating or whatever, the thing that sort of covers it. So I think that's like thematically, that would probably does what I'm most interested with conceptually. And then the oyster knives just go straight through the image themselves. So
we were having some conversations about that work as we were installing it. And one of the things we discussed was wondering your process on that. Which comes first? Do you have an image and you think of an object that could go with that image? Or do you find an object and you're trying to put that with an image? Or how does that process work?
Well, I guess I started rambling a minute ago and then it got off track. But yeah, so with this show, it was a pretty abrupt shift from what I was thinking originally and what I was planning on. So I've made collages forever, usually in my downtime, like all the way, since early 20s or whatever. So so I think for me, like it felt appropriate. I was kind of like digging around on Amazon, like thinking about wall decals and maybe as a starting point. And so then I was kind of making those mock-ups as well on my, like in Photoshop, and those were the sort of instructions for how to install these works, etc. And so these were really like that. They were I would say really loose and gestural, which is not always how I work. Like a lot of times I'll start with a pretty defined idea and then kind of go at it, and it may transform in the studio a little bit, but for the most part, I've got like a pretty clear idea of what I'm going to do going in. These were not like that. These started kind of with images, like disparate things. So this one's called Trotter Occident, which is that was the horse. That was the Leland Stanford's horse for Edward Muybridge's those famous images of animal locomotion of the horse in sort of mid stride. So for me, this like kind of related. A nautilus is it's the only or one of the only cephalopods left with its shell, and so it's a really ancient creature. So sort of thinking about like how photography started and how it's evolved over time, that sort of thing. And then thinking also about like how, I mean, that Moorbridge's work was a really important moment, because it was that really definitive linkage between, you know, art practice and academia. You know, Leland Stanford went on to start Stanford University and that sort of thing. So there's this kind of like binding of all those ideas, I think, in this piece, and they really collapse together. Like I'm writing, I don't ever think, like I have to write, of course, but writing I don't ever think about as like one of my strongest suits, but these felt more poetic, you know, they were gestural, I guess. So if that makes sense. Does that answer that question?
Do you want to talk about any other, you want me to go to anything specific, Justin, for you to talk about while I'm out here?
Well, yeah, maybe I can also discuss this piece since you're right here at it. So that work I made, you know, in 2017 or something like that. So that's an actual cast bronze foot, so it's heavy. It almost looks like it was cut off of a public sculpture or something, and then it's kind of jammed into this like foam slide sandal. It's really like a pretty awful sort of amalgamation of things. So, you know, for me, I think bronze is one of those technologies that is like really significant in terms of like our evolution as human beings, but I think also it's a cherished material. We think of it always as like a high art material. If something is made of bronze, then it's really, of course, the process in and of itself makes it sort of valuable, or so to make a long story short, that I had this like really maybe another unarticulated thing that I kind of always think about, but you know, this notion that the connection between the foot and the ground is like metaphorical for me, in that it's the place where like ideas become something, you know, it's how you move through the world and make a dent. And so I often sort of use this as symbolism. Sometimes I use hands or gloves in my work and that sort of thing as well. But to me, these felt like an appropriate kind of combination with, or maybe juxtaposition with these like hyper saturated like wall images. And also I think the emoji is like the hill emoji is it's this thing about like digging or unearthing, and then it's you're unearthing like a smiley face or whatever. So I think like its relationship to maybe they look like artifacts to me, the croc and the bronze foot. So I think in this way that they kind of have this like tenuous relationship. So yeah, that I think all in all, that's kind of that was sort of my thought process to this show, is like, how do you penetrate the facade of the image to find something like true or honest in the mess of it,
And in the artifice of it, right? It's almost like you can access that by putting the juxtaposition of two different things that are both untrue, then somehow reveal a truth. So it's like one truth and two lies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I responded to one of the things that we didn't really advertise, but like Tess and I both came into this with titles in mind, and we sort of switched because we were like, oh, that suits my work pretty interestingly, and so yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I kind of loved what you had done with your title, is like they're you know, you sort of mash the two things together and then they become, I don't know, something else. They hopefully transcend a little bit of their materialness. So
Yeah, I love that about your work. I think it does. I think there was a question in the comment about this one, Justin.
oh, okay. Did you talk about the piece with the monkey that looked okay? So that one, honestly, you know, I think there's a thing with time happening with all of these works, in that like it's like pointing back to old techniques and processes. and then it's like in contrast to like some of the newer sort of strategies like the wall clings and stuff like that. So in the same way that I was sort of interested in that, Nautilus. I think, you know, like a primate is a sort of cousin of ours, or one of our most closely related cousins. So I kind of was thinking about this as like a portrait of humanity a little bit. And then those, when I was having that airbrushed, that's a like vanity car tag on the front of that. And so I was like, what could this thing be named, you know? And I got to looking at it and I was like, the actual, like, the thing that they give you, like, this is your vanity car tag, what do you want on it? That was the one, like, that was the one that said any name on it. And so I was like, that feels kind of interesting. So it's like, to me, this one feels kind of like this like comical portrait of humanity a little bit. And so I just kind of flippantly named it self-portrait as a primate, but I really was thinking about it like just like a portrait, you know, kind of all being in this mess together a little bit, I think is another piece of what I was thinking about. And I also, like, I won't try to dig like way deep into it. Some of them have like really, for me, I spent a long time thinking about what those things mean and how they come together. That one to me was more, you know, it's like a sketch. And I think that sometimes there's energy in those things. And then sometimes there's, sometimes there's like energy in the interpretation or something like that, I guess. Maybe. Yeah, and that one's a gently used matrix VHS underneath that one.
Interesting. I read it as a book. I thought it's a book under there. I think the scale of it. I love that it has like mimics waves.
Oh yeah.
Folds. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really, I didn't know what would happen. Like I had done some experiments, and then they sort of stuck to the wall in interesting ways, but I knew that like Lynette and her team would like do something else with it. So maybe like saw the lid a little bit, like it had instructions, but it was like, okay, let's just sort of like let it see how it goes. Would you talk about the piece with the, okay. All right, that for some reason that one just, oh, thanks. Right, I saw that. Cool. Nice.
I'll share that the most difficult thing about that piece was installing it and knowing that the intention was to have it be wrinkled, which is something we never do with vinyl clings at all. And so it took us a long time seriously to come to terms with wrinkling it to install it. Yeah, that was hard.
It's a brutal thing to do with it, because they're not,
yeah, exactly.
they're not like super duper expensive, but they're not inexpensive either. It's like, you know,
sure.
You get a
you know, whenever you install clings or vinyl or anything, it's, you know, squeegee and bubbles and precision. And then to do that was such a departure from what we usually do with vinyl. So it was quite the experience, that's for sure. So thank you for that.
Nice. Tess, can you talk a little bit about there was a thing that I only saw briefly, but like the animation that you had done. Maybe, do you mind sharing a little bit about that one?
Yeah, actually wonderful transition, because I just pulled it up. I'll do a screen share. And Lynette needs to share her. Do you need my help with this?
Oh, I'm sorry, what do you need to do?
Okay.
You need to have you share your screen?
I wonder where that echo is coming from too. Oh, now it's gone. If you go down to share screen and say allow others to share.
Yeah.
I think it's coming from my phone.
I think it is.
There we go. All this tech. Interference with tech. Okay, here we are. Share this. Okay, so this is one. I have 4 animations. This one I think is a complete thing on its own, and then I have 3 others that are kind of just, again, kind of sketches. And let's play this.
You should say, don't touch your screens, it's coming.
I think when we're talking about like the juxtaposition of two things, like revealing something really truthful, this is one of the moments where I think in real life it happens spontaneously and just becomes like this incredible prescient, poetic moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to obviously, I was kind of, this for me was like this moment watching the debates was just had a moment of clarity with it. Oh, this is not going to be the full thing. I don't know if I have the full thing here on my computer. This is my other computer.
I'm so glad you showed this because I haven't seen this one yet. Maybe I missed it last night or something like that. But this is so.
You know what? I'll show it on. Let me grab my phone. I'm charging my phone again. I can show it on my phone, and maybe walk around and show some other things too.
Okay.
Okay, let me do that because this is not the full version.
So do you feel like I don't mean to catch you up. I know you're doing like 8 things at once. So whenever
That's okay.
But do you feel like, I mean, that's incredibly like, well, you said prescient is a really great word for it, but I was also thinking sort of, I mean, that was also like a collective moment of like humor and cringe for the United States. So I would say as well. Do you think like, I guess I'm also thinking back to the work that you did. It's an older body of work, but it was with the VR headsets and this, like, you had created this fantastical Amazon kind of planet, like after Bezos had taken over the world. And I thought that was sort of like, those are sort of humorous or like, in a maybe a dark humorous kind of way. Do you think that plays a role in your work?
Dark humor.
Yeah.
If there's humor at all anymore. I think my work used to embody a lot of humor, and it's slowly become less and less really about that. For me, I think that fly moment with Pence, I think it became, obviously a spectacle and something very, very funny and very humorous. And but to watch it live, I don't know how many people actually saw it happen. And what he was talking about at that time was delegitimizing Black Lives Matter and talking about law and order. And it was an incredibly rehearsed set of lies. And this fly then appears on his head, and there you don't hear anything that he's saying. And it was more than humorous. It was, it almost felt like an act of God or something. Like it felt so unbelievably just serendipitous in a way that was like, this can't be a coincidence. This feels like something else. And that's another whole thing, right? But
yeah.
To me, it became this kind of moment where I want to make work that speaks to truth in some way. I feel so drawn towards that impulse. And so I'll show you the fly here. It's coming back up.
Okay.
We can see it in grid mode if we're looking at Tess's iPhone.
Yeah, you can also pin that screen if you want to sort of see it a little better. So you're using Maya to do this, right? Isn't that what you're working with?
So this is a set of the smaller animations too. I just want them to be reflective really of, again, the kind of political moment that we are living through, and the ways in which here this was just a glitch that ended up happening when I was trying to make a cloth flag for a different animation that I didn't include. And it ended up changing the UV mapping on my cloth to like really glitch it out, but to a way that it reminded me kind of Navajo blankets or something that felt like we want to like remix this symbol so much and like really reinvent it, and we want to reclaim it, right, from the left or from the progressive movement. Yeah, so this is another small animation. Sorry, my phone's dying again. Again, thinking about the wildfires in California and this kind of roller coaster simulation of a burning planet. And I think I'm not trying to, like, I want my work to be accessible to a broad audience. I'm not at a place where I want it to be like mental gymnastics. I think that this work is pretty accessible as far as its like conceptual or poetic value, you know. I don't think that it takes a lot to like get what I'm showing you, you know. Again, just because I'm a little bit I'm feeling more and more an impulse to just come from personally a place of like honesty and integrity and personal truth with my own work. And these are some of the paintings. I thought I use Maya. I use Maya and I use a little Houdini. And then for anything that's VR related, I use Unity. And then I do some JavaScript coding and stuff for my web-based work and for the augmented reality. But I really wanted to get back to painting because it really is a source of my creativity and it has a directness in communicating a kind of image that I don't want to have all the bells and whistles of tech, or I think it's almost at a point where it's less effective for me creating with all of these high technologies that I think just coming from like, I feel almost like it's this impulse to prove myself and my value, my relevancy, and it's always from this place of ego, trying to conquer tech. And I think it's totally, it's definitely something that's super important with my career as a teacher, as an educator, but I just am craving more and more just the directness in communicating through like something like small paintings, which has a humility to it. So these are just all paintings that I've made within the last 2 months. And then there's these QR codes here that you can access information about the painting. And I have some, again, kind of politically driven ones that are just to kind of capture the moment.
So you're also like, your title is something like a cultural, what is it, cultural studies or something like that in it? Are you doing?
It's art, technology, and culture is the area I teach in.
Okay. So are you teaching any like theory classes that also?
Yeah, I try to insert that in it because of course, like my student body are, they want to make, you know, anime and video games, and but it's so important for them to also be thinking, even more important for them to be thinking theoretically. So yes, lots of photo theory, because our area is really like lens based and computer based. So we do photography, video, and then animation and game design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Really cool.
So those are some of them, and I have. This is an augmented reality piece. I don't think I can share it this way, but this is a marker. You scan the QR code, and then through JavaScript, a 3D model pops up on top of this image, and it's very large, and you step back and back and back, and it reveals some text. projecting an image of blank. There was a moment where Trump is standing on the balcony with his mask off, and he was quote unquote projecting an image of strength. And there was something about like projecting an image and the masks that we wear, and the images that we project, you know, through the phone. Again, thinking about narcissism as really just a kind of such an ingrained behavior. Like it's so ingrained in our culture. We kind of have a culture of narcissism, and it's so. I think Trump's presidency really has like highlighted that aspect of our culture and our behavior. And so I was thinking about that as an artist, and also within like the body politic. So that's where I'm at with it. I'll come back over here.
So one of the things, and I keep going off the different stuff, but I like one of the things that I was really interested in is the way that you were writing about your work. Do you find that like writing at all is part of? Does that help you clarify? I mean, that's a softball of a question, but like, I mean, clearly you maybe have some background in it. Does it play into? You know, I guess I was thinking about the piece with that has some of the things like the sort of this installation of things from your grandmother's recipe book and stuff like that. Like to me, those things really overlap with what seemed like kind of literary themes. Maybe could you talk about that a little bit? Narrative.
Yes, I do. Right. I'm at the. Ooh, we're really feedbacking here. Get out of this. I'm going to leave it all together.
It's a remix.
It is. Leave this. I'm leaving the meeting. So I will write about this work now until, you know, the future, and then sharing it. I have an academic conference in a couple weeks. I think with, again, so this body of work, which I need some time to kind of unpack it. I always feel this way whenever I'm like at the end of a show. It's almost like, especially when it comes to the install, there are things already that I want to change about it. I want to edit it, but it's already, it's done. So it's always never really a finished thing, I don't think, to me. But so I was finding these moments of signs and symbols, both personally and politically, and I wanted to kind of bring those two things together to talk about ego and narcissism within body politic and within myself. And so it just so happened, as I'm making this work for the show and working up to the show, I kind of allowed my intuition to kind of guide my practice in a lot of ways. And so there's just a series of events that happened where I am finding like poetic relevance, or I'm finding just particular events and things that have been happening in my own life that kind of overlap with a kind of self-discovery, or providing an opportunity to present myself in a more vulnerable way or a more real and honest way. Because rather than like, I'm just not at the point right now that I want to like speak like cerebrally. I want to be communicating like more from like heart to heart connection, and whether that makes for good art, it does. That remains to be seen, but it at least makes for something that's true.
Yeah, right. It's really human. I think that's what I picked up from that piece last night. I was like, man, that's like a tender kind of moment in the midst of all of this, and for me that was nice. I just thought it was really nice. So.
Well, thank you. I think now I'm kind of like struggling, like I don't know necessarily still, like if any of the personal communicates anything of value to an audience. I really struggle with that. Like I think it's an important part of my own process, but then I get to a space where I have all of this space, and maybe I include things that like it's asking a lot, I think, of viewers to take the time to read like a personal narrative associated with a personal symbol or something that means something to me. That's really asking a lot of somebody to devote some like compassion or empathy, but in a lot of ways, like, I think that's also maybe a layer to this, like including things from my grandmother. That's such a part of my own kind of, I feel like I'm not enough, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much tech I accomplish, like how much
Right.
I am able to produce as an artist, like, I still feel like I'm not enough. And I found these like layers in this kind of healing process myself. Like, we're in a moment of healing, maybe as a nation, and I'm in a moment of like strange healing, like being isolated from my family for 9 months, being a single mom, like coming back, seeing family, going to Pittsburgh on my way out here, just because I was in New York for a long enough time. I could make my way out here for the show, staying with family in Pittsburgh, and realizing like I've never come to terms with my grandmother's suicide. She's died when I was my daughter's age. And that wound for my mother, just like that gets passed on generationally. And so I made this one painting, and I decided to include some of those things because, again, it's like sharing of myself, and it feels cathartic, and it feels perhaps like I do have I have a lot of her things out and some personal items that my mother gave me on the other side of the gallery, and some paintings that Violet did as well. Because I think it's borderline, right? It's like I have this opportunity to share myself in a way that does also feel a little bit like it's being driven by ego or something. Like, I'm not sure like where that really lies, I guess, when I'm sharing things like that are from my own personal narrative. But
I can't speak to everybody, but the way that I was sort of reading it, and I totally understand. I like identify with what you're talking about. For a long time, I made work
Oh, wow.
that was dealing with so like my condition is like I've been really fortunate, but it's like terminal. So it's kind of open ended, and the doctors don't really know what to do with it. So like right when I was in undergrad, I was like trying to make sense of like what mortality was. I mean, everybody does that at some point, or hopefully everybody does that at some point. But I think that I was like kind of crashing into that. I'd had some pretty serious health issues. Anyways, the reason why I bring all that up is like I think that I don't know that work seemed to be well enough received, but I also think that like this and I certainly hope I don't sound like I'm uh, talking down, but I guess what I'm getting at is I think that there's that impulse, at least the way that I read it in academia, that to kind of like steer away from those things in terms of being objective and that kind of thing. But I couldn't help thinking when you were talking about Camera Lucida and that like kind of tenderness in that book. Are you familiar with that book, Roland Barthes' book? Yeah. So that to me, that was kind of like I saw some parallels there, and I like I'll be honest, I've never read that the book wholly through, but I've definitely read chunks of it, and it always to me it always did seem like this really intimate investigation about mortality, but it was big. It was related to something bigger, and that's sort of what I see your work doing, at least in this space, is like it's so clearly related to current events like really heavily, but then it also ties into like this really universally human experience, which is like making sense of any of this as we're like I don't know, dying to like crash land this into like the most depressing thing ever. But yeah, so I guess as far as I'm concerned, I do think what you did was interesting, and I thought, especially seeing kind of having access to your other work as I was preparing for this show, it was a really nice like tender departure, I think. So
well, thank you. I appreciate those thoughts and sharing that, also like sharing your personal story. I do think it's important for us to like listen to each other, like and feel and empathize with each other. I mean, I think that's the most important thing we can do. Right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I was going to ask that question of you both, how the worlds chaos is affecting your work, and not just in terms of shows. At Roy, we were committed to keeping our schedule because it's a very tight schedule, and we know that emerging artists don't always have a lot of opportunities, so we wanted to be sure to keep to that schedule. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that you can't not be reacting to what's happening. So how has your work changed, and then how are you negotiating that change in your work with the exhibitions that you have scheduled?
I can say that I think this ties back to the question about humor in the work. I think my work was always kind of cynical in a way, right? Funny and cynical, especially going into grad school. And again, that's like this cocky ego thing that I really like want to get rid of from myself, just as a creator. And so I think that because of climate change, because of that, and the pandemic is a result of that. It's like human civilization has just expanded into all of these wild spaces to the point where we transfer disease between each other. It's all related, and I feel like I can't make work really about anything else except somehow like I want to be invested in some way into thinking about ecology and thinking about truth and these kind of themes. Like I don't want to make. For me, it's not like I can't access that humor anymore. But Justin, I feel like your work does access it, but in a way that it becomes like, again, maybe like a little bit hinting towards a kind of dark humor when I see the monkey's face and it says any name, or there's knives like stuck to an image, like,
Mhm.
or there's this book and I don't know what the book is, but there's like waves crashing over it. So some of it is funny on the surface, but it's really underlying that. It's like, what's our relationship to these like fantasy images of landscape,
Mhm.
of our planet, right? That like,
Yeah, absolutely.
do you know?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, Tess, and I think I'm there too. So like I grew up riding BMX bikes, and that culture is like, I think there's like an inherent like irreverence in it. I don't anymore. I just got too old for it. In fact, I jumped over a fence yesterday and almost broke my back. But I used to sort of, we'd travel a lot, and we were really pretty competitive. We were very serious about it. So but in the midst of all that, there was a kind of humor, and that's how I got into photography, is like taking pictures of riding bikes and stuff like that, and my friends and our road trips and all of that. So I think that I've always tried to navigate that. Let me back up a second and say I think that irony is like a plague. It's the defense mechanism of like millennials on, and so I think that for me, trying to juggle that relationship between irony and sincerity and authenticity and truth, like these are all terms that I think are like incredibly poignant right now, especially with like, well, cell phones and social media, all that stuff. So like, so there's always like, I try to engage humor. I think that, like, I call it a humor hammer, but like, I think sometimes it's like the best, for me, it's the best strategy. It's the one that I'm most familiar with. I often try to talk about my practice as stand-up comedy and that sort of thing. So like, but I think you're right. Like the hardest part for me always is to navigate that. Is this just about defense, or is it about trying to communicate something? It's like is a genuine laugh important? And can it say something significant? So yeah, I'm rambling at this point, but yeah.
No, that makes a ton of sense to me. And I have to say, our sparsely attended opening last night, people were congregating in your section for the most part, which I thought, and I think because it's humor really does draw people in
Okay.
a way that then you can, I think it's a really important, it's an important strategy, or it's one that I think you're using well. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate those words. Yeah, any questions from you guys by any chance? I know I've got a handful of students here and former students.
I've got a question.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
How are you doing that with your mask? It's just a green mask and you're chroma keying it, but like how are you doing that on Zoom?
Okay, so my computer's too old to do the backdrop thing, but yes, it is a green screen mask I've made for myself here. And if you go to the settings virtual background, it says I have a green screen.
Oh my God.
And right, so, and then
I'm
I
doing
can.
every Zoom.
So
Let me-
Jim, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tess.
No, I was just gonna say, if you want a green screen mask, let me know, I'll make you one.
Yeah, so Tess, or Jim, I'm sorry, Tess is the artist that I was talking about. I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that you would probably be interested in some of the things that she's doing.
Yeah, no, I saw on Instagram and I've been looking at it. Amber sent me the link because I was getting my phone set up today, and yeah, I just forgotten, but she sent it to me and I was like, oh my God, I forgot. So I'm here now. But
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. I can speak from experience. As a professor, we're always busy, but I'm sure if you reached out, she'd be happy to chat with you about some of your ideas or something like that at some point. I'm just volunteering you for stuff.
Yeah, totally. I want to be, giving of myself to others. So yes, I'm a professor too, and so I'm here for students.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. There's also, if you're interested in this talk, I think it will be posted.
Yeah, we'll post it on our YouTube channel. Justin, are you seeing the, there's a question for you in the
thanks,
chat
Alyssa.
about the foot?
Yeah, it is. So it was a silicone mold and a I think the other thing that's funny about my usually installations have gotten to a point where they're kind of like tidy, even if this some of the work is like messy, like this one behind me's got all these wrinkles in it and stuff like that, but generally they're kind of sparse and a little bit tidy and that sort of thing. But if you ever go into like watching me in the studio, it's like a ridiculous. I mean, I'm I'm questioning whether I like know what I'm doing at any point. So I'm like making that cast, and like my wife is like wrapping my foot in plaster gauze, and so it was a whole thing. And I like bronze is a material that I really love, but I couldn't cast it on my own. So the sculpture professor here is like a super awesome guy, and he well, Chuck, of course, but so I just took him the wax, and I was like, can you help me with this, and so he cast it for me. So it took two goes to get one, because the first one kind of had a hole in the heel of it. So comedy.
Further explore that a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Its relationship to tragic events. That's a great coping mechanism, certainly. And in those moments, those very tense moments, it's a wonderful thing to have as a coping mechanism.
Mm.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, like, I really, I don't know if agree is the right term, but like, I liked what y'all were saying about it, especially towards the end. I think a big thing with me in comedy is, I forgot what comedian said it or was doing it on during his stage or the exact wording of it, but it was something to the effect of there are some events and some things that are just so tragic and so horrible that like no amount of, I guess, reverence to it or around of just like not talking about it to try and like make people feel better is actually going to accomplish that. And some things just almost require, and comedy can step in and just let us laugh at some things that are just so messed up that there's nothing else to do about it. And obviously I think it's, if you can handle that, then do it. Make sure you're in the company of people who, can do that. But for those who can't, like for instance, very, very tragic events like the COVID thing or the election politics, how the world's going. I mean, to some extent, just talking about how horrific it is and just like going over it's only going to make people more depressed. So that I think is a really good place for comedy, where you can just go to a show, see someone whose job it is to make the most ridiculous like point towards that's something that's just you can't change it or can't affect it. So yeah.
Thanks, Moody. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think Albert Camus is a philosopher. I've been talking about him a lot this semester, but I don't like buy into all the things that he wrote about, and but the idea of absurdity and this notion of like Sisyphus rolling the stone up the hill and it's sort of being happy about it. That to me that is like a really apt thing. And my dad's a pastor, and like I've sort of grown up in like Protestant Christian background, so I have like faith systems that I like him. They help me understand the world, but I think that philosophers for me also point at similar ideas, and Camus has been a really important voice in terms of like how I make my own work. So again, like ideas of absurd, how we deal with things that are seemingly meaningless, and like trying to make the best of those moments. And I think I look at that as a big part of my job as an artist and educator.
Yeah, definitely. And I think certainly as an arts administrator, I recognize how important art is right now. Sometimes people come into the gallery, either they make an appointment or they come in during our hours, and they just take a breath, and their shoulders leave their ears and go, oh, this is beautiful. I just needed to see something beautiful today. So I know it's not easy to continue to create in these extraordinary circumstances, but it is so needed. People need that moment. They need that ability to inhale and exhale and just spend some time in meditation with your work. So we're so grateful that you're sharing it with us. What is next for the two of you? What's on the agenda, either what you're working on or where you're going to be exhibiting next?
Well, so I actually, my wife and I just bought a house, so that's pretty incredible news. And so it has a massive 2-car garage. So I've kind of been working in spaces. Oh, thanks, Tess. I've been working in spaces that are like a kind of shared communal studio spaces, and also I have like a small kind of studio set up here at home. But yeah, I haven't. We moved from Cincinnati, going on, I guess August will be 6 years ago, back down south. And so for me, that's like a huge thing. So I don't actually have any shows like in the immediate future. So I'm going to take a breath and try to enjoy setting up a new studio. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's just as important as making the work for all the students out there. I know right now that you are, you're in a moment where you have to produce. It's important for you to produce bad things and then you'll get breakthroughs and produce good things. But when you are a little bit later in your career, you need those times to breathe and to and then you'll be fresh to make something worthwhile. I think it's important to take a break. I am going to be working on some 360 video over the winter break with a dance colleague of mine, contemporary dance. We're doing a collaboration. I'm part of CCAC, which is the Southeastern College Art Conference. I don't know, Justin, if you're a member or not, but that's a great.
Our art department is. It's something that I've been meaning to spend more time like looking at, and I'm derailing again. Yeah, I recommend it to the students all the time to look at the CPAC website. So yeah.
So I'm chairing a panel, and I'm on a panel, and then I'm really excited. I have a friend who has a printing press. She's a painter, a fabulous painter, Tammy Wynn. And so I was invited over the summer to be part of her quarterly publication, and I did this digital pop-up, which is an AR-based pop-up. And so we're going to be working on into next year an artist book of digital pop-ups of different grass species, and then accompanying narratives that talk about the history, a kind of broad macro view of the history of that particular species, because grasslands are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world because of agriculture primarily. You know, fires obviously don't help. They do help if they're managed, but if they're not managed, then, you know, they definitely don't help either. And I think because actually we don't have any managed fires, there's a lot of shrubby kind of shrubby wood species that end up taking over grasslands. So, but it's really like agriculture that is the main dominant thing, and also lawn culture. So grasslands in particular, and I find grasses to be so absolutely beautiful as just aesthetically, I'm really attracted to them. So that's kind of what I'm working on. It'll be a digital pop-up book with Passenger Pigeon Press in New York. Those are my two. I'm like excited to just be working on like a research project for a while. And not putting myself out there through. I loved this talk today. I think my last kind of virtual speaking appointment will be the CCAC conference, and then I really need to like not look at my face on the screen for a little while.
I understand that.
That's why I'm happy to cover it up and cover it with some images of my work, you know?
Right.
Like I don't want to look at my face. I don't want my face to be my presence I don't want that to be the thing that I'm, you know, judged on. I don't know, you know, so.
Nice. Oh, Lynette, you're muted.
Yeah, it's so weird. Tess can hear me because we're in the same room, but yes, I'm muted. I'm sorry about that. Can both of you plug yourselves? Here's your moment to share your website and your social media. Where do you post? What kinds of platforms do you use?
Yeah, I'll chat mine in too.
Yeah,
Thanks,
throw
Pete.
those in the chat and then everyone can get those. That's great.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, public, Tess Elliot, and then my website's tesselliot.com.
Yeah, and I have a Facebook that I'm not very active on, but it's just my name. And usually I think right now it's a picture of me holding a fish like a good old boy, but usually it's a picture of like an animal with a camera in their hand. So.
Oh yeah, I do like that. That's on your
Oh yeah, here.
Zoom. Is it a beaver or something with yeah,
So I showed up to a meeting with that. Like I didn't realize that was going to happen, and it was pretty well received, fortunately.
Sure. That's a good icebreaker.
It was like a serious meeting, like a hiring committee.
That's a valuable insight into you, and it's a good icebreaker. You know, so we've been talking about that. You know how much you know we're relying on virtual world now, right? And so we're starting to do some hybrid events where we have some you know, in-person elements to it, but also some virtual elements. I hope we don't lose some of those virtual elements. I've been able to do some things and go some places that I would not normally be able to do. But it is no substitute for a personal conversation and a connection, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you in tech are further ahead than the rest of us. So that's good. I often think when the zombie apocalypse comes, what are my skills exactly as an arts administrator? But
I got you, Lynette. I got you.
Thank you so much. It's partnerships that will keep me on the right team. That's what the connection is. Yeah, very good. Right. Well, we're nearing the end of our time together. Does anybody have any questions or things that we didn't cover? Any last minute, some things people want to say? This has been just such a wonderful conversation. I appreciate so much everyone's flexibility and understanding, and especially the, you know, walking around and conversations. So thank you very much, Tess, and very much, Justin, for your cooperation and collaboration. This has just been a wonderful experience. So thank you all for joining us today, and look for this to be up on our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now get back to the studio, the garage.
All right. Have a good one.